Now let's get to our first conversation today. Now the President and Chief Executive of the Dangote Group, Aliko Dangote, has led a groundbreaking of a $2.5 billion fertilizer plant in Dangote, Ethiopia. The project is in partnership with the Dangote Group and Ethiopian Investment Holdings, with a production capacity of 3 million metric tons of urea annually, and is expected to become one of the world's largest fertilizer complexes. Located in Ethiopia's southeastern region, it is expected to leverage the country's abundant natural gas resources from the Hilal and Kalub reserves to boost agricultural productivity, create jobs, and enhance food productivity security across the African continent. Speaking at the ceremony, Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, described the fertilizer project as more than just industrial progress, stressing that it symbolizes shared responsibility, cooperation, and peace. Prime Minister Abiy said the project reflects Ethiopia's commitment to harnessing opportunities and elevating its presence on the global stage. On his part, Dangote commended Ethiopian Prime Minister and his cabinet for reforms and economic liberalization that have opened the investments, of course, to private investments, and positioned Ethiopia as one of Africa's most attractive destinations for global investors. He lauded the government's investments in infrastructure, including transport, energy, and the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which he described as a foundation for the country's industrialization. Well, let's talk to Dr. Muda Yusuf. He is the founder and chief executive officer of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprises, to give his perspective on what this means for the African continent. It's good to have you on the show, Dr. Yusuf. Good afternoon, and thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, Tulu. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I think it's another step following the refinery built in Nigeria. Now we see another $2.5 billion fertilizer plant being inaugurated in Ethiopia. I want to make us understand what this means for the African continent and for Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote.
Well, thank you very much, Tulu. You know, Alhaji Aliko Dangote has said it repeatedly that it is only Africans that can develop Africa. That is not to diminish the importance of other investors from, Europe, America, Asia, and all of that. But you cannot compare the kind of commitment that African investors will have on their own continent to what level of commitment can come from other clients outside the continent. So he has that very strong conviction that Africans must take the lead in developing Africa. And I think that has been his cardinal philosophy. Because the kind of risk that Alhaji Aliko has been taking in terms of investing in Africa, I don't think there is any investor outside the continent that can take that risk, even within the continent. So he has been very bullish. And now that we are talking about this economic integration on the continent, using the platform of the African Continental Free Trade Area, there cannot be a better champion of this African economic integration. There cannot be a better champion of the AFCFTA than Alhaji Aliko Dangote, because he has his footprints effectively in almost 12, going to 15 countries on the continent, with very solid investments. We are talking about manufacturing investments, which is considered one of the most risky or the riskiest aspect of investment on the continent. So it's a very good thing. It's leading the way in terms of African economic integration. It's leading the way in terms of taking practical steps to promote the whole ideals of African Continental Free Trade Area. Another very important point, which we need to emphasize here, especially with respect to Ethiopia, is a commitment, political commitment to public-private partnership. At least I witnessed the event, and you could see the passion, the excitement, and the commitment of the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. In fact, he said at a point that Alhaji Dangote is his investment advisor. That is the level of respect that Alhaji Aliko Dangote has, in that country. And sometimes when you listen to some of these expressions, you get a feeling that we are not even appreciating our own enough. It's even better appreciated outside the continent. You could see the excitement of the Prime Minister. So there is that strong political commitment to this private investment in Ethiopia. That is one lesson we must take away. Our indigenous investors need to be supported from the very top. Because the Prime Minister was there with his deputy, with all his key ministers to show that political support. And beyond that, that project is even a partnership it's in partnership with the Ethiopian government. They have an investment arm which is partnering with Dangote. So that means that even the Ethiopian government has a major stake in that investment. So it's a whole lot of lessons for us, as a country, and it's a whole lot of lessons as to how the kind of support we should be given to our own investors here in Nigeria. And I must also point out that there were quite a number of Nigerian banks at Ethiopia to support Alhaji Aliko Dangote in terms of funding. We had the Afrexim Bank was there. Major Nigerian banks were there. So that shows their belief, trust, and confidence in the business judgment of Alhaji Aliko Dangote. So it is a very good thing for the continent, in my view. And I think we need to support more of these kind of initiatives to ensure that economic security of the continent is driven from within, not from without. That makes it a lot more sustainable.
All right, then. Now, talking about conducive business environment, which is what Alhaji Aliko alluded to, because I also spoke to him at that event, and he said a conducive business environment, the economy is opened and all of that. Particularly, what can we learn as a country with regards to opening up our environment and also allowing investors to come in? The fear sometimes here is number one, many will talk about monopoly in some cases, but that's not really the issue here. The business environment is so wide for everyone to fly. So what are those particular things you think we need to learn as a country, one after the other, looking at what has happened in that? This is not the first investment, even in Ethiopia. I think it has a cement factory also in production already in Ethiopia.
Yeah, he already has a cement plant in Ethiopia. And he even said at that event that he was even going to expand the investment in cement in Ethiopia. And just as I said, Dangote Cement is in about 12 countries on the continent. The big thing to learn from here is to stress the importance of political economy in the development of a country. And when I talk about political economy, I mean the interface between politics and business, the interface between political leadership and business, the complementarity between political leadership and business. That is extremely very, very important, because we should see these investments not just as something that belongs to those investors. It's something that belongs to the country, because the multiplier effects on the economy is huge. And that is one thing that came out clearly in what happened in Ethiopia. So we need to strengthen our political economy more constructively to facilitate more domestic investments. Because one thing that stood out with Ethiopia is the ease of doing business. And the ease of doing business flows is driven largely by the political leaders, by the political commitment, by the commitments of the political elites to private sector investment in a way that the political leadership take ownership of those investments because they know the value beyond, the promoter of that investment, the value to the economy in terms of job creation, in terms of social stability, in terms of technology development, even in terms of revenue, and more importantly, in terms of economic security, energy security, food security. Because as a continent and as different countries on the continent, we need to be conscious of need for sovereignty in some critical economic sectors. That is what this is all about. So there's a lot to learn about, creating the environment, ease of doing business. We are doing a bit of that. The economy, our own economy is already open. There is no issue about that. The challenge we often have sometimes is the adequacy of the political commitment to ensure that indigenous entrepreneurs are supported. That is what we need to improve. And again, it is also important to stress that there is a lot of collaboration between all the private sector and all the key agencies in that country to support investment. And once the agencies see the leader are they committed to the promotion of private investments. And in any case, just as I said, the Ethiopian government has a stake. It's a partnership. So they don't joke with it.
Yeah.
And the prime minister also was very emphatic about his zero tolerance for corruption. He was very emphatic that he doesn't tolerate, and in fact, he even said it, that after his tenure, he's open to probe. Anybody is free to probe him to see whether he has amassed any wealth as a result of his being in government. He was that confident about his, zero tolerance for corruption. So the environment needs to be very transparent. We should have zero tolerance for corruption, and the commitment of agencies to agencies of government to ease of doing business has to be top notch. So these are some of the things that stood out in this particular process that we just reported.
Indeed, you just touched on it because I heard him talk about it, that no room for corruption, and if anyone asks for anything from Alhaji Dangote, you should get across to him. And I think that is something that is very important when business owners, investors can be able to, establish manufacturing industries and all of that without issues of corruption or people putting them something under the table or something. But let me ask you, what do you think are the expected impact of this fertilizer plant when it comes into fusion? Now, we expect it to come on in less than 3 years, according to Alhaji Dangote. He says this will come up in less than 3 years, according to him. But what are the expected benefits? What are the expected impacts of this moving forward? Not just for Ethiopia now, but even for the continent. What are your expectations?
Food security is a major security objective for any country and for any continent. As a continent, we should not have any business importing anything food. So this investment in fertilizer is a major step forward in promoting food security, in promoting food sovereignty. That is very, very important for any continent. And beyond that, I am sure that even some prospects of export also exist for Ethiopia and even for Dangote from that investment. So that is a major thing that we should realize in terms of the benefits to both Ethiopia government and people, and to the continent. Because the capacity will grow, and if the capacity grows beyond the consumption capacity of Ethiopia, it will be exported. And who says some of those exports cannot even come to Nigeria to support, even though we have our own fertilizer plant here. But again, it opens up opportunities for trade within the continent. And one other important thing is that at that inauguration, I think the point was made that this is not just going to stop at the fertilizer plant.
Yeah.
There's also an aspiration to even undertake investment in refinery. So the prospects are even bigger than the refinery itself. And we have a huge opportunity on the continent. We have a GDP of almost $3 trillion and growing. We have a population of about 1.6 billion people. So the market is here, the resources are here. So we need to mobilize all this investment. And the fact that these investment decisions are driven by people who are indigenous investors on the continent has a lot more value, because most of the benefits of those investments will be retained here. All this issue about capital flight, pressure on forex, and those things will be minimized the more we have such investors that are here, that are indigenous, that are supported by government. So the opportunities are immense. And the beauty of this, again, from an industrialization strategy point of view, is that whatever Alhaji Aliko Dangote is stepping into, most of those investments are resource-based. That's what we call resource-based industrialization. That is the most sustainable strategy of industrialization. Because to support that fertilizer plant, the major consideration was the presence of gas in Ethiopia. Because the production of fertilizer is almost maybe 80–70% gas. The same thing with cement. The same thing with the refineries. So the resource availability is a major consideration in industrialization. And we have to take that on board as part of the philosophy of industrialization, as part of the industrialization strategy. So that we don't have an industrial sector that will be exerting so much pressure on foreign exchange. The industrial sector should be earning foreign exchange, not putting pressure of demand on foreign exchange. That is not to say that industries will not import. Of course, there's no country that is self-sufficient in everything, but it has to be minimal. And in order to minimize that import dependence, we have to focus a lot more on resource-based industrialization and support it as much as we can.
Great stuff. Resource-based industrialization. I'm holding on to that. Finally, DJ, before I let you go, you've touched on the very important AfCFTA, which is supposed to be a handshake between the African countries across the continent. But I will still ask you that, are we really getting there? Are we getting the positives of this? There was an IATF in South Africa. Now the last one was in Algiers and all of these meetings coming together. Are we taking advantage of this $3.3 trillion you mentioned around the continent? Are we taking charge of it at this time?
Well, progress is being made.
Okay.
And one of the major progress that is being made is the progress that is being made by the investors. I'm talking of the entrepreneurs on the continent. And a leading example and success story in this area is Alhaji Aliko Dangote, because of his Pan-African disposition as an investor. There are pockets of integration that is going on in terms of trade within the continent. Unfortunately, most of those trade are also informal trade by nature. A lot of that happen on the West African corridor. Almost 50% of the trade is informal. So we need to formalize that. Secondly, is to also demonstrate better political commitment to the integration of the economies of the continent. Political commitment is still not enough. Yes, the AfCFTA can come up with protocols to remove tariffs. But what investors are complaining about, even at the sub-regional level, is the non-tariff barriers. The non-tariff barriers are still big issues for trade within the sub-region.
All right.
And within the continent generally.
All right, that's
checkpoints,
our time.
Transit levies, all sorts of barriers.
All right, then. Dr. Muda Yusuf,
so these are some of the things that we need to deal with.
That's our time. I must thank you so very much for joining us to discuss this very important topic. Thank you so much, as always. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Tolu. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Yusuf is the CEO of